Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Hillman here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the positives and negatives of being a black student in Maastricht University. For those of you who are new to the channel and you don't know me, I'm Hillman. I'm a recently graduated medical doctor in the Netherlands. I still live in the Netherlands. I studied at Maastricht University, lived there for 5 to 6 years, and now still living in the country but in a different city. So I'm going to be sharing from the wealth of experience that I've gotten living in that city, being a student in that city, and being an integral part of the community in the city as well. And the reason I'm making this video specifically is because I've gotten a lot of requests from people, of questions from people, or parents of people who are moving here from a lot of African countries predominantly, who are just wondering about how it is living life there. A lot of people have the experience anxiety about moving to a new city, understandably so, and Maastricht is not a big city. It is somewhat medium-sized, but it's not a big or renowned city, which a lot of people know a lot about. There's not that many videos out there as well telling you about Maastricht. So I can get the worry, I can get the anxiety a lot of people and parents also experience just sending their kids or coming themselves to this city. So I was like, you know what, let me just make a video talking about this and hopefully can give some people some level of peace of mind about moving there, or just show them what they can expect and allow the decision to them ultimately. So if you're curious about what my experience has been like, definitely keep watching. Disclaimer before we start, this is my experience, this is how I've experienced it. Other people might have experienced it differently and that's okay as well, but I'm just sharing from my experience. Hopefully this can help someone as well. Just give them something to expect or give them an idea of what they could expect when they get to Maastricht or Maastricht University. I'm going to be sharing 2 negatives and 2 positives that I see as things which come from just being a black student in Maastricht University or Maastricht the city. I'll start with the 2 negatives. The first negative is, of course, the racial tensions. I'll split this into 2. You have on one side the microaggressions/racism, and on the other side you have just the cultural tendencies. Let's start with the cultural tendencies. You have the thing which they call Zwarte Piet. That's all the Black Piet, which is something which they celebrate around November, you know, paint their faces black and all that kind of stuff. And I've made multiple videos talking about this in the past. I've tried to raise awareness of the effects of this. But it's something which culturally down south, where Maastricht is still very prevalent. If you go around Rotterdam, Amsterdam area, they do that less because of just the diversity there. There are more movements to make sure that it's not a thing which is very prevalent. But down south, they still practice it a lot. And that's something which they've been very, at least the locals have been very oblivious to the effect it's having on international students or students of color. So they still practice it very, very much. So around the period of November, I was the president of the African Caribbean Student Association in Maastricht. So around the November period, I could really tell from talking to my members that they really struggle with this, just seeing it, the effect it has on them. Some people can handle these things a lot more than others. So it's something that could potentially be very disturbing as a person of color, especially as an African, because, you know, they're painting their skin and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot going on, but it's just something to be aware of. That's something that happens every November, December. They paint their faces, they go around the streets parading, all that jazz. Look up videos online, Zwarte Piet, Black Piet, Netherlands, you find what I'm talking about. But that's something which definitely happens there as well, which is a disturbing experience for black people. I know a lot of people, including me, sometimes just leave the area around that period and then come back when it's done. So that's the cultural part. That's the main thing I can talk about on the cultural part. And then the microaggressions part. I'm someone who, as a disclaimer, I'm not very sensitized to racism. I grew up in a place with all black people. I never had to deal with racism until I moved here. So it's something that it's taken me a while to actually get used to. Okay, someone saying this, they might mean this, they might mean this. I'm very optimistic, so I turn to also sometimes ignore these things. But being the president of an African association has also gotten me, you know, more in tune with microaggressions, racism, and how to spot that, how to pick that up, and what to do with it eventually. But I would say I've experienced a lot more microaggressions. I've experienced a lot more things which sometimes could flow from ignorance, and sometimes I'm just like, bro, you could teach yourself, educate yourself. Where, for example, a case in point, when I was in the first year of medical school, I had this patient who walked in, looked at me in the eye. I was like, oh, I did not expect this. At the moment, I laughed it away. I was like, I don't know what. I did not think much about it. But later on, I thought about it. I was like, okay, I wonder what he means or meant with that. Today, I don't know because I cannot find out. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, you know, you can fill in that blank whatever way you want to fill it. Another instance, for example, is when I went to a small village outside of Maastricht University, like Eisten. I was teaching a guy English there. He lived in an old people's house. And I would walk through the old people's house, like the lobby, because you have to walk through the lobby to get to the lift, to go up to his floor. Walking through the lobby, I could feel the eyes on me. And it's something which is known. In the Maastricht area, especially the villages around, a lot of people have lived there for years, never left. They've lived there for years, never seen a black person before. So you coming there is really a strange thing for them. If you're around Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague area, the Randstad, you don't have a lot of this because there's more diversity there. So people who live there and the villages around as well are used to diversity. But in Maastricht area, it's slightly different. So if you experience something like that, do not be shocked. It's part of, a lot of them are old, you cannot change them in regards to a lot of things, but it's just them being shocked to see something they've never seen before, which for me is quite strange in a country like this, right? But that's something which for the people who live in those small villages is still very much a reality. So do not be flabbergasted if that happens to you. But another one which for me classifies as a little more than a microaggression is the one I experienced doing one of my internships in a village outside of Maastricht, like 30 minutes away from Maastricht. And I'm not going to call the village's name or the doctor I worked with because just privacy concerns. But It's a village where there's a lot of people who have lived there for a long time. They know each other. They've never really lived anywhere else. And they still call black people the N-word. Very much, like, very present. It's a word which is still very present in their vocabulary. And I was shocked by it. The doctor, for context, has worked in some African countries. So I don't know, if some part of him maybe feels like he has a right to call black people the N-word, and the Dutch N-word, so like the neger, not nigger, but neger. And one time I was sitting there shadowing him, and this patient comes in and they're talking about, referencing me and the kids, the African kids in Africa. It's like the neger kinderen in, the nigger kids in this country, and this in, and I was sitting there, I was just like, what is happening here? Because I've never heard white people with other white, like, talk about it in that way. So I was very flabbergasted. But then again, I don't really tackle these things head on like that, because I'm like, okay, I need to process this and see what I'm doing with it. Is it a battle worth fighting or not? Eventually talked about it with a couple of friends. They didn't have that much input. And I was like, I cannot let this slide. I'm not necessarily struggling with it that much, but someone else could potentially struggle with it more than I do. It's my moral obligation to at least talk about it and let him know that this is something that could potentially be harming others. He's supposed to be an exemplary figure in the society. So if he's doing this, probably the patients also think it's normal to do it. So I talk with him, and there doesn't seem to be that big of an awareness. And I was very strategic with the way I brought it to him. It was a very comfortable environment, not accusing or anything, but just actually out of concern. Do you know this could potentially hurt people? And the response was, yeah, but other people have not had trouble with it. It's like, did you ask them? No, he didn't. So I brought it to him, but there was not that much of I feel like he didn't really understand the gravity of the effect it could potentially be having on others as well. But at least I felt like I was good, because I had already confronted it. I had already planted the seed. Whatever happened with that seed, I have no idea. Fast forward a few years, I heard they stopped sending students to that practice because of just a lot of other concerns that were raised. You never know, maybe that played a role as well. Maybe he got more awareness of the fact that, maybe what he was doing was wrong. I never know, but I felt like at least I had the obligation to at least tell him that what he's doing could potentially be harming others. I might not have a problem with it now, but others who could come in the future might be really just disgruntled and shattered by experiencing that the way it's present there. So that's one of the instances where, if you're living in the area, you can be confronted with these things where people still throw the N-words here and there. And when I did my research, I found out that 8 years ago, it was something which was, there were songs about it. There were songs with the N-word in the Netherlands, and that's 8 years ago. So it's not a crazy thing that people in the villages still use it. But then it's just something which, if you're in the Randstad, you're not exposed to these things. And if you go down to Maastricht and you hear the N-word being thrown around like that in the small villages, you might be a little shook, or you might be a little distorted by it as well. But just know that it's something which is not extremely strange in the small villages outside of Maastricht. In the city itself, in Maastricht itself, there's a lot more diversity, a lot more international workers, expats. So you will not have that as much in the city. But if you go to the smaller villages, do not be shocked if you experience as well. So that's definitely one negative. That's the first negative, just the racial tensions that exist in Maastricht and the cities around it. The second negative, which for me is a big one, because I love food, I love culture, I love all the things that remind me of home, is the absence of African stores, the absence of African restaurants, the absence of salons, barbershops, and all these kind of things, which just make life for you as a black person easy. If you want to get a haircut, you don't have to call and ask in all group chats, do you know a barber who could do my hair? The first time I got to Maastricht, I was like, I'm a very adventurous person. So I'm like, I always give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm not very picky with things. Although barbers in Cameroon have messed up my hairline, I'm like, barbers in Cameroon messed up my hairline. So, you never know. You're never safe anywhere. So I went to the barbershop around the Markt, so at the city square, one of the main city squares. The first barbershop I saw, I walked in and I asked, I want to get a haircut. The lady looks at me, she's like, just so you know, I'm willing to do it, but I don't have that much experience with black hair. I was like, ma'am, you know what? I'm gonna just walk out right now. The fact that for me, it was just, I appreciate the honesty though, but it was just for me like the main barbering shop in the city center. So it was that was the first experience I had in Maastricht, and since then, a friend of mine who also cuts hair just kept my hair from then on, and I also recommended him to everyone else. But there's a few more barber shops specific for Africans in the city, so it's there, but it's just not as easy to find. So you have to know who knows who, or look online and find them and then make an appointment and stuff. So it's difficult to find them as compared to if you're living in a city like Rotterdam or Amsterdam, where they're everywhere. Talk about African restaurants, there's no African restaurant in Maastricht. I recently saw in the group chat of the African Caribbean Association in Maastricht. If you definitely are moving to Maastricht and you want to be in touch with them, let me know in the comment section and I will definitely put you in touch with them as well. But I was in the group chat and someone started cooking African food and delivering it to people and stuff. And I feel like this is so good to see how far the community has gone from when I was there to now. These are things which we need more, because African restaurants, non-existent. The good part is you are near Liège, the city in Belgium, where there's a lot of African restaurants, markets, shops, supermarkets and everything. So it's within reach. Aachen as well also has African restaurants, so you can definitely find them around. But it's it's like 30 minutes away as opposed to having it in the city itself, like you would have in other Dutch cities. So things like that. There are few African shops with basically the essentials, at least for me as a Cameroonian. You can find stuff as well as a Ghanaian, Nigerian, but if you're looking for very specific things, you might not always find them there. So there's a few African shops, but African restaurants, no. African barbers, no. Salons, also scarce. There are few in the city, and there's probably people who are doing it independently as well, but you really have to look and search before you find them. So they are there, it just takes a lot more effort, as opposed to if you're in a bigger city, you would have these things just by doing one Google search, for example. So that's another negative for me. But on the bright side, again, like I said, it's not that far from other major cities like Eindhoven, Liège, and Aachen. So you can always find it if you need to, but it's something which is not as close and as easy to find as you would expect in other big cities. Now, on to the positives. The first one for me is just the university space, the university culture. I've done a lot of work with the African Caribbean Association in Maastricht, with the diversity office, with the university in general, to just make sure that students of color feel like they're represented, feel like they're heard, feel like they are part of the university and not just passively existing in the university, as a lot of the times students tend to feel. And I could tell from the year I moved to Maastricht, I could literally count the amount of black people I saw in my faculty. Like there were like 5. And now, before I left, it's like I walk around and there's everywhere. Like in my last year living in Maastricht, I would see new people every day. I'm like, bro, where do you come from? Like, it's halfway through the year. Where are you coming from? I've been here, but you've just not seen me. Like, that's how many people were there. That's how big the community has grown. And I feel like the community is growing so big. It's a great thing. There's great opportunities there to like leverage that and build something which is really meaningful. But also the university is also trying to make sure that all students feel included, feel heard, feel understood, feel like they belong there. It's a difficult task, but I feel like the university is definitely one which is trying their best. From what I see working with them inside as well, they're trying their best to make sure that students who come from all over the world feel welcome in Maastricht University. Again, people might have different opinions about this, but this is just from my experience as a student, as someone who went through tough times and was helped by the university, and someone who has also worked with different parts on different organizations within the university. I can definitely tell that they are doing their best. No one gets it perfectly. It's a difficult task, but it's a university that tries its best to make sure that all students really feel like they belong in Maastricht University. The second positive, and which is tied to some degree to the thing I just mentioned, the first positive as well, is how small the community there is. When I moved there, it was even way smaller, like almost non-existent. And I remember the first time I went to a party, because I really struggled with fitting in Maastricht, the city, when I started. I was doing so much to integrate. I was doing so much to connect with Dutch people, but the understanding was not there as much, because I also cut myself off from internationals because I was studying in Dutch and I was trying to really integrate into the Dutch society and learn and have Dutch friends and all that stuff. But it's almost like the Dutch people were not necessarily really open to having me in their circles, and I kept trying to force it, but it didn't work out. So that really got me like in a tough mental spot. And I remember the first time in Maastricht that I felt like I belonged was the African Caribbean Maastricht University Society's Halloween party, October 2018. That party, I left that party feeling a weird sense of empowerment. Like, I cannot describe it to words. Every time I talk at Acma's event, I have to reference that party because that party was just so life-changing for me. It was the first space where I felt like I belonged without having to do anything. You know, just being there, just dancing and connecting with people without saying words, just on music and on vibes. Like, that for me was so instrumental. And that's why since then I made sure that I did my best to keep the ACMA spirit alive, because I know how important that community can be for people who are coming in and who feel lost in the city and everything. So that for me was a very instrumental period, that party. And one thing I appreciate about the city of Maastricht and the Black community in Maastricht is how small it is. Because now I live in The Hague, a bigger city, and before I moved to Maastricht, I lived in Rotterdam for a year to integrate. And there's a lot of diversity, which is great, but at some point you just feel like you're another number. You just feel like you don't know anybody. Of course, you can have your smaller circles, but in the bigger sense of things, you just, you see each other in the streets, nobody greets, because, well, you're going to greet everybody if you're trying to greet every Black person, because there's just so many people. But down in Maastricht, it's another thing. If you see another Black person, there's not that many of you. So it's like, you give the nod, what's up, you acknowledge the person. I feel like that camaraderie, that creates some level of camaraderie, which is really, I love it. And you can build a community in Maastricht. You can build a really strong foundation in Maastricht because you're not that many. It's like we got to stick together because we're not that many. At least those who think about community and see the importance of community. Because there's some people who just see Black people and see competition. Those people still exist. But I feel like for me, I could see the positives of it, where because of just how little or small the community was back then, I mean, it's growing now exponentially, but it was so easy to form that community, create those bonds with ACMAs or otherwise, and those bonds could like serve you for a lifetime. And like if you have that strong a community, it just helps you overcome a lot of things. And I feel like that's something which for me was very everybody, I loved. I definitely loved, and I still miss, because now I live in a bigger city and everyone is just, you feel like there's just so many people and it's so hard to connect with people. But in Maastricht, it's just the community was, there. You could easily find each other. You're in a group chat. You don't live that far from each other. It was just nice. It's easy to like make friends and build that strong community. And I can see that as well in other people I see who I'm still in contact with who live there. They have like, strong bonds with each other, which I think just comes from having a smaller community. And for me personally, that really helped me understand myself more, because I think I got the space to really explore what I like, the things I like doing, find people who are like-minded, who like doing the same things, or put myself in space where I was confronted to try different things and get different perspectives, as opposed to being in a bigger setting, a bigger city with a lot more people, and sometimes just feeling like you have to go along with the flow, go along with what everyone else is doing because it's popular, and if you're not doing it, you're weird, or you're an anomaly. So I feel like I like the small and intimate nature of the space in Maastricht, because I could also discover myself a lot more. There were spaces to, create the narrative, because there's not a big population that's telling you what to do. You can decide what you want to do, you can decide who you want to be, you can do what you like doing, because no one is saying you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to conform to this notion of what being black is like, or being a black man is like. So that's something I definitely love about the community, and that's the second positive for me, just the small nature of the community and how that serves to building bonds, and how that also gave me the space to discover myself and explore myself a lot better, or understand myself a lot better. Community is definitely growing, like I said. So now it's a couple of hundred people. Still, it's nothing compared to Rotterdam. It's nothing compared to Amsterdam. So there's still that space to like have those strong foundations, have those strong bonds, and really build that community, which can serve in the most tough times, because there are going to be tough times to the black person. There's going to be things you experience which is difficult to put in words. And having that community that understands you, where you, for a lot of things, don't need to explain yourself, and they get it. I feel like that's important. And I think that's a community which, especially the ACMOS community, is one which I'm definitely trying to make sure that they keep the spirit alive. Even if I'm not there, I just want to keep that spirit alive, because I think that community is very important as well. That has been it for this video. That has been it for the positives and negatives from my experience of being a black student or black person studying in Maastricht University and living in Maastricht University, the city. Hope this was helpful to someone. Let me know in the comment section if there's anything I can do to help you. If you're moving to the city, you're having difficulty connecting with people, if you want me to bring you in contact with ACMOS, just let me know in the comment section and I'll do my best to help you out with that. But yeah guys, until next time, hope you like this video. If you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps the video as well. Subscribe if you want to stay updated with videos that are going to be coming up. But thank you again for watching, and until next time, stay blessed and peace.